The text arrived while I was buying flowers for my father's grave. White roses, his favorite, from the same shop where he'd bought them for my mother every Friday until she died 10 years ago. Don't bother coming to the funeral. Ungrateful daughters don't deserve to say goodbye, Janet. I read it 3 times, standing in the florist shop while the elderly owner, Mrs. Park, wrapped the roses in tissue paper. My hands didn't shake. I didn't cry. I'd learned long ago that Janet's cruelty was as predictable as her Botox appointments. Everything all right, dear? Mrs. Park asked, her weathered hands pausing in their work. Family drama, I said, pocketing my phone. Nothing new. She tooted sympathetically. Funerals bring out the worst in people. These are on the house. Your father was a good man. I thanked her and left, roses in hand, knowing I wouldn't be allowed to place them on his casket. But that was fine. I had other plans for this morning. The Wells Fargo building downtown was quiet at 9 a.m. on a Saturday. Most people were probably preparing for the 11 a.m. service at Riverside Memorial Chapel, where my stepmother Janet would be playing the grieving widow despite having spent the last 5 years draining my father's accounts. Ms. Blackwood, the bank manager, Harrison Wells, met me in the lobby. Everything is prepared in the conference room. I followed him past the regular banking floor to a private area reserved for high-value clients. The conference room held a long mahogany table, leather chairs, and 3 people I'd specifically requested: a notary, a court-appointed witness, and Patricia Kumar from the district attorney's office. Thank you all for coming on a Saturday, I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. I know this is unusual, but my father was very specific about the timing. Harrison spread out the documents. As executor of William Blackwood's estate, you have full authority to proceed. Shall we begin? I nodded, pulling out my phone to check the time. 9:15. The funeral would start in an hour and 45 minutes. Perfect. First, I said, opening my briefcase, I need to present my father's actual will, not the forgery my stepmother filed with the probate court last week. Patricia Kumar leaned forward, interest sharpening her features. Forgery is a serious accusation, Ms. Blackwood. I'm aware. I handed her 2 documents. On the left is the will Janet filed. On the right is my father's real will, drafted by Morrison Associates 2 months ago, signed in the presence of 3 witnesses, and recorded on video. She studied both documents. The signatures are completely different. Because Janet traced his signature from birthday cards, she didn't realize Dad had developed a tremor in his right hand after his stroke. His real signature shows it. The forgery doesn't. Do you have the video? I pulled out a tablet and hit play. The screen showed my father, thin but alert, sitting in a law office. His voice was clear as he stated his name, the date, and his intent to create a new will. I, William James Blackwood, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revoke all previous wills and declare this to be my final testament. He looked directly at the camera. I want the record to show that I am not being coerced. My wife Janet is not present because I have discovered she has been stealing from me for years. The evidence is in my safety deposit box at Wells Fargo, which only my daughter Emma has access to. Harrison produced a key from his pocket. Shall we? The safety deposit box was brought to the conference room. Inside were bank statements, forged checks, receipts for jewelry and cars I'd never seen, and a ledger in Janet's handwriting detailing exactly how she'd been siphoning money from various accounts. $500,000, Patricia said, scanning the evidence. This is grand larceny. It gets worse, I said, pulling out more documents. She mortgaged his house, my childhood home, without his knowledge, forged his signature on the deed transfer. She was planning to sell it the day after the funeral. My phone buzzed. A text from my stepbrother Kyle. Where are you? Mom's looking for you. I ignored it and continued. My father knew he was dying. He also knew Janet would try to cut me out of everything, so he made preparations. Harrison opened another folder. Mr. Blackwood transferred all liquid assets to a trust 3 months ago. Mrs. Janet Blackwood has no access to these accounts. How much? Patricia asked. $8 million in liquid assets. Another $12 million in real estate holdings. All of it goes to Emma, except for one thing. Harrison smiled slightly. He left Janet exactly $1, quote, so she cannot contest this will on grounds of being forgotten. I thought about Janet standing at the funeral right now, accepting condolences, probably already mentally spending money she'd never see. The image should have brought me satisfaction. Instead, I just felt tired. There's more, I said. Dad knew Janet would try to ban me from the funeral. He paid for everything in advance, the plot, the service, the reception. But he also did something else. I pulled out the final document. He bought the funeral home 2 months ago, through a shell company I manage. Patricia actually laughed. He bought the entire funeral home? He wanted to make sure I'd have a legal right to attend his funeral, regardless of what Janet did. I smiled sadly. He said, Emma, they can't ban you from your own property. My phone rang. Kyle again. This time I answered and put it on speaker. Emma, where the hell are you? The service is starting in 20 minutes. I'm handling Dad's estate, I said calmly, as his executor. You're not the executor. Mom has the will. Mom has a forgery. I have the real will, plus evidence of her stealing $500,000. I paused. Tell her the police will be waiting when the service ends. Silence. Then, you're lying. Check the funeral home contract, I said. Ask her who owns Riverside Memorial. Spoiler alert, it's me. I hung up and turned to Patricia. How do you want to handle this? We'll wait until after the service, she said, gathering the evidence. No need to make a scene at the funeral itself. Thank you. I stood, collecting my own copies. I should go. I have a eulogy to deliver. They banned you, Harrison said gently. They tried. I picked up the roses Mrs. Park had given me. But you can't ban someone from their own property, and you certainly can't stop a daughter from saying goodbye to her father. The drive to Riverside Memorial took 15 minutes. I parked in the owner's spot, my spot, and used my key to enter through the side door. The main chapel was full. Maybe 200 people who'd known and loved my father. I could see Janet in the front row, draped in black like a Victorian widow. I made my way to the small viewing room adjacent to the main chapel. Through the one-way glass, I could watch the service without being seen. Dad's casket was covered in flowers, everything except white roses. Janet had always hated them because they reminded her I'd existed before her. The funeral director, Mr. Riverside, found me there. Miss Blackwood, I heard about the situation. What would you like me to do? Nothing for now, I said. Let her have her show. The service was beautiful, I had to admit. Janet had spared no expense, with Dad's money. Of course, the eulogies painted him as a devoted husband and successful businessman. No one mentioned his first wife. No one mentioned me. When it came time for Janet to speak, she approached the podium with practiced grief. William was my everything, she began, dabbing at dry eyes. These last months were so difficult, especially with family members who caused him such stress and pain. Several people glanced around, probably looking for me, Janet continued, but in the end, it was just us, the way he wanted it. That's when I entered the chapel. The side door opened directly onto the raised platform where the casket sat. I walked slowly, roses in hand, very aware of the gasps and whispers rippling through the crowd. How dare you? Janet shrieked. I told you. You told me not to come to the funeral, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the chapel. But this is my funeral home. Dad bought it for me, just like he left me everything else. Security. I am security, I said. I'm the owner, and as the owner, I'm revoking your reservation. You have 10 minutes to conclude this service. The crowd erupted. Some people stood to leave, others pulled out phones. Everyone talked at once. Through it all, I walked to my father's casket and placed the white roses on top. Hi, Dad, I whispered. I'm sorry it had to be this way, but I promised you I'd protect everything you built. I promised I'd tell the truth, and I promised I'd stand up to her, no matter what. I turned to face the crowd. Many of these people had been friends of my father's for decades. They deserved to know the truth. My father died knowing his wife had stolen from him, I said, my voice steady. He died knowing she would try to steal everything from me, too, so he made sure she couldn't. Every dollar she spent planning this funeral came from accounts she no longer controls. Every asset she thought she'd inherit is already gone, and in approximately, I checked my watch, 15 minutes, she'll be arrested for fraud, forgery, and grand larceny. Janet's face had gone from red to white. You can't prove anything. Dad kept excellent records, I said. He also recorded every conversation from the last 6 months, including the one where you told Kyle that you couldn't wait for him to die so you could finally get rid of his miserable daughter. Kyle stood up in the front row. Mom, what is she talking about? She's lying. Janet grabbed his arm. She's always been jealous. The police are outside, I said quietly. Dad wanted you to have the funeral you planned. He said everyone deserves a proper goodbye, even from people who didn't love them. I walked back to the casket, running my hand along the polished wood. The real funeral, the one for people who actually loved William Blackwood, will be next Saturday. Same time, same place. Everyone is welcome except the woman who spent 5 years robbing him blind. Patricia Kumar entered with 2 uniformed officers. She nodded to me, then approached Janet. Mrs. Blackwood, we need to speak with you outside. This is harassment, Janet shrieked, but she was already backing away. I'll sue every one of you. With what money? I asked. Dad left you $1. He said it was one more than you deserved. As the officers escorted Janet out, the chapel fell silent. Then, from the back row, someone started clapping. Mrs. Park, the florist. Soon others joined in, Dad's golf buddies, his business partners, neighbors who'd watched him suffer in silence. Kyle remained in his seat, staring at his hands. I walked over and sat beside him. I'm sorry, I said. I know she's your mom. I knew she was taking money, he admitted quietly. I didn't know how much. I didn't know about the house. Dad didn't want to punish you for her crimes. There's a trust fund for your education. He wanted you to finish law school. He laughed bitterly. Guess I'll need it for her defense attorney. That's your choice, but Dad hoped you'd use it to become the kind of lawyer who stops people like her. I stood to leave, then remembered one more thing. Oh, and Kyle? You're welcome at the real funeral next week. Dad always liked you. He just couldn't stand what your mother was doing to both of us. The chapel emptied slowly. People stopped to offer condolences, to share memories, to whisper their suspicions about Janet. I stayed until everyone was gone except Mr. Riverside. What would you like me to do with the flowers? He asked. Donate them to the hospital. Dad always said funeral flowers were wasted on the dead. I looked at the casket one more time. Except the white roses, those stay with him. Later that evening, I sat in my father's study, my study now, going through his papers. I found the letter he'd left for me, separate from the will. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then you've already done the hardest thing I ever asked of you. You've stood up to Janet, protected our family legacy, and shown the world who you really are, my brave daughter who spoke the truth. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from her while I was alive. The stroke weakened me more than just physically, but I could still plan. I could still ensure that everything I built would go to the person who deserved it. The funeral home was probably overkill. Your mother would have laughed at me spending $2 million just to make sure you could attend my funeral, but I knew Janet would try to keep you away, and I couldn't bear the thought of you not being able to say goodbye. Use the money wisely, build something that matters, and remember, the only approval you ever needed was your own. All my love. Dad. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. Tomorrow, there would be lawyers to meet, properties to manage, and a business empire to run, but tonight, I just sat in his chair, surrounded by his books and his memories, finally able to grieve the father I'd been protecting even as he protected me. Janet had tried to ban me from his funeral. Instead, she'd given me the chance to honor him the way he deserved, with truth, justice, and white roses on his casket. Ungrateful daughters don't deserve to say goodbye? Maybe not. But daughters who fight for their fathers, who stand up to thieves and liars, who honor last wishes and keep promises? We don't just say goodbye. We say it on our own terms, in our own funeral homes, with the truth echoing off every wall. And somewhere, I think Dad was smiling.